talk. Sometimes the wind is just really powerful. The good news is that it's blowing the sound waves from the pending static fire directly at us. So we should have some good sound for you here today. So welcome. I am Chris Gebhardt, the Assistant Managing Editor of NASA Spaceflight, and I am here with my colleague
Thomas Burkhardt, also from NASASpaceflight.
There we go. We are located about 3 miles away from Launch Complex 39A, 3 miles to the northwest. And what you are looking at live on the right-hand side, center right on that screen, is the huge crew access tower, formerly the fixed service structure at 39A for the space shuttle era that has been modified. To its immediate left, you see a tall stick figure with some wispy venting down toward the bottom of it. That is the Falcon 9 rocket being fueled right now for its static fire. We are expecting static fire sometime within the next 30 minutes. We'll be able to give you a much more concrete time for that once we see the rather large event that always takes place at the T-minus 20-minute mark. We have not seen that yet, but we went live because we do see the sort of wispy vapors down at the bottom indicating that fueling has begun. So we will be with you until we static fire here today. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them up in the chat for this live stream, and we will go ahead and get them answered for you. Just give me one quick moment and we'll start taking your questions here momentarily and overviewing what we're going to be seeing today. There is our big T-minus 20-minute vent. So we are on track for a static fire at 10:09 Eastern Time. So 20 minutes from now at 10:09. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and throw them up in the chat here, and we will get them answered for you. So we do have, for our first question is, why is the second stage there? And that's an excellent question. Let's talk a little bit about the test, because the test answers the question of why there is a second stage. So what they're doing next week, next Saturday at the earliest at 8 a.m. in a 4-hour launch window, is the In Flight Abort, where they will launch this Falcon 9 with a fully fueled first stage and second stage and a Crew Dragon on top of it. And 88 seconds, more or less, into the flight when it reaches max Q, there will be a command sent to the first stage engines to shut them down, which will simulate a failure of the first stage. And that simulated failure, or well, an actual failure, but simulated on the part of SpaceX, will trigger Dragon's abort systems to pull the capsule away from the failing rocket. In order to make it an as accurate test as possible, to actually test what the full configuration of the vehicle will be, they need a second stage for that. And they need a fully fueled second stage. So the only thing that isn't actually on this Falcon 9 that would be on every other Falcon 9 is that the second stage will not have its Merlin engine installed. There will be a weight simulator on there so that the weight and characteristics and flight profile are all accurate and as flight-like as possible. But other than that, they don't want to waste an engine that they don't have to. so they won't be doing that. But other than that, everything else is as normal on the Falcon 9, but because they are destroying it, there are no grid fins, there are no landing legs. They're not going to needlessly throw those away when they know that the rocket will not survive this abort. Now, it either won't survive because it will break up by aerodynamic forces when Dragon aborts away, or if it manages to survive, it will simply impact destructively the Atlantic Ocean. That is what we are expecting. So, and I'm also getting a note here that it is 10:10 is the targeted T0 time. I was going by just what my watch said, so minute off. Forgive me on that. So 10:10 is our targeted ignition time for the 9 Merlin 1 engines. So what we are going to see today, and we'll get a very good view of it because we are looking directly at the rocket here, is we will get an ignition of all 9 of the Merlin 1D engines on the first stage. They will fire for anywhere between 3 to 7 seconds. That will verify the performance of the entire stack and stage, going in for final data reviews before they detank and roll back to the horizontal integration facility at 39A and get the Dragon capsule and trunk hooked up to the top of the rocket before they roll back out and do their final reviews before the launch next Saturday. So that is why there is a second stage on board, and it's a great question for that. So likewise, if you've got other questions, please throw them up into chat, and we will get them answered for you as we wait here for the static fire, which is about 17 minutes away, which is pretty good. That's a remarkably on-time static fire, because the window for static fire tonight actually extends until 1800 EST, which is 2300 UTC. So they have an 8-hour test window, and the fact that they are going very quickly or toward the opening of the window is very, very good. So joining us here is a spaceflight fan.
Indeed.
You got any questions, Alan? You're normally good about asking us questions on our chat.
What's the importance of a static fire test specifically?
Good question. Yeah. So, what's the importance of a static fire test? Which is a great question. So, SpaceX is the only company that static fires their rockets every single time ahead of a mission, and it's a good question because this booster is flying for the 4th time. Why do we need to do a static fire? It's been through so many already. The main reason SpaceX opts to do it this way is because by doing static fires this early, you take the rocket through its entire countdown, you fuel it, and you actually light the engines, so you can ferret out a lot of issues. This way you can work through issues with the pad, with the ground infrastructure, with the fueling process. You can find any issues that might be present on the rocket in enough time that you either completely protect the launch date because you can fix it and still launch on time, or the launch slips a day or two, as opposed to not finding this out on launch day and then having an 8-day fix ahead of you, which delays the launch quite a bit. So that's why they do it every single time, regardless of how many times the rocket's in. Okay. To give you an idea of how bad the wind is, the wind just took down a very steady ladder and major steady tripod of one of my colleagues. We hope the camera's okay. 18 miles per hour. Yep. So pretty good wind. Here today. So, all right. So, so another question, why is this one going from 39A and not 40? An excellent question. This one is going from 39A because it is Crew Dragon, and Crew Dragon can only launch from 39A. It's the only place that they have access to it while it is on the pad. And one thing that they will be doing with the In Flight Abort, even though Dragon is not on board today and not currently mated, is on launch day next Saturday, they're going to go through like it is a full count and a full practice for the eventual Demo 2 mission, which will carry crew later this year. So when Dragon rolls back out, they're going to swing the arm over. They're going to get into Dragon. They're going to do some various things and really do a full up practice countdown. And you can only do that with Dragon from 39A. With the Crew Dragon from 39A, so that's why it's going from this particular pad. Today will actually be the first time since the 25th of June that engines have lit on 39A. The last time this pad was used was for the Falcon Heavy STP-2 mission back in June, which was the third flight of the Falcon Heavy and the first night launch of the Falcon Heavy. There should another question we have is, when is the next Falcon Heavy? This year. We'll go with this year. I'm not being coy. It is this year. We just don't have a date, but it's much later in the year. Yeah, something like no earlier than Q3, Q4 time period. We will have another one. We will have another one tentatively scheduled for this year. Say that again. So that is that. So let's talk a little bit too, as we continue to wait, about what the IFA mission will be, and then I'll continue to take some of your questions. So IFA will be launching in a 4-hour launch window that opens just before 8 a.m. on Saturday, the 18th of January. Because even though Dragon is an International Space Station vehicle and will be going to the International Space Station on its crew flights, the In Flight Abort test does not have to rendezvous with the space station, so it is not beholden to International Space Station positioning on the day of its test flight. So it is not launching northeast either on a station inclination. It is going due east out of Kennedy on this particular test. That's why we can arrive at an 8 a.m. launch time and not have to worry about the International Space Station and where it is for anything like that. Another question that we have is, how far away is the Starship pad in your view? So you can't see the Starship pad in this view, but it is directly behind the Falcon 9 in this view. It is inside the pad perimeter of pad 39A, very, very close to the pad that we've known and loved for over 50 years. I mean incredibly close. Next week when we go to set cameras at the pad and everything for this, we will be able to show you some of the larger progress and give you a better sense of the positioning of it. But it's very close, but you cannot see it from this particular vantage point. Will Ripley be on board next week in Crew Dragon? An excellent question. We don't know for certain, but I can't imagine they would not have Ripley on board.
They would have a mannequin.
Yeah, they said they would have something, but we don't know if it's Ripley specifically or not. But they'll definitely have some type of anthropogenic test device on board to measure the G-forces that are imparted as Dragon's abort engines fire and yank the capsule away, and to verify everything that the crew would experience if they ever had to go through an in-flight abort. So whether or not it's Ripley, we don't know, but there will be some kind of anthropogenic, crash test dummy, basically, on board. Why not do a wet dress rehearsal versus a static fire? Another excellent question. So a wet dress rehearsal gives you a good amount of data, but it doesn't give you any data on how the engines are performing. And remember that a huge difference with the Falcon 9 versus the other rockets that are currently flying is that all of its 9 Merlin 1D engines on the base of that Falcon 9 first stage are reusable. So starting the engines, lighting them in static fires to verify their performance is a huge part of what the static fire does that a wet dress rehearsal would never give you. So this allows them to, just like they can ferret out problems on the Falcon 9 or the ground systems with these static fires, they can also do the same for the Merlin engines as well. So if they have to make tweaks, they can do so while more or less protecting launch dates. But an excellent question, but that's why SpaceX does static fires instead of just pure wet dress rehearsals. Another question, will the crew access arm be moved for this test to mimic a real crew launch? So when Dragon is actually on board and they go for the in-flight abort, yes, the crew access arm will swing over, they'll have access to Dragon, they'll treat it like it's a regular Dragon crew launch, just like they did for the Demo 1 mission back in March of next year for their uncrewed test flight. They'll do for that one. Because Dragon is not on board the Falcon 9 and not on top of the Falcon 9 for this test today, which is just an engine firing test, they have the crew access arm fully retracted away into its stow position for that one. Oh, another great question here from SpaceFacts. What is the difference between L- and T-? Excellent question. So L- means it is the time until launch. So launch minus so many minutes. And that comes in real handy because sometimes you have built-in holds in your countdown. So your T-, which is time till launch on the countdown, can be different from your L-, which is the time until launch. So L- is the time till launch, T- is what's actually on the countdown clock in that moment. Ellen Lift wants to know if the booster survives, how far out is splashdown? So the booster will splash down about 10 kilometers from shore. If it survives the abort, and Crew Dragon will splash down about 30 kilometers offshore if they survive. Okay, so scrolling through just to make sure I'm getting all the questions. Will this capsule be recovered and used for cargo? Excellent question there. So the capsule will be recovered. It's a full in-flight abort test, so parachutes will deploy next week when the test actually occurs. Again, reminder, this is just the static fire engine test, not the actual launch. So yes, this Dragon will be recovered. SpaceX has not said specifically what their plans for this one are after it's recovered from in-flight abort, but Jessica Jensen, the lead for Dragon production and flight, said last year that the Crew Dragons and the Cargo Dragons, even though they're the same version, are different from one another, and there will be different builds for the Crew Dragon and completely different builds for the Cargo version 2 Dragon. So based on that statement, it wouldn't appear that they will be reconfiguring this Dragon for cargo service, but this is SpaceX, so never say never. It's always possible that they would pull it, find that it's in good enough condition to reconfigure for use as a version 2 Cargo Dragon as well. Another question that we've got here, if the Falcon 9 actually suffers a failure during this test, like for real, not in its simulated failure, and Dragon survives, does that technically work to NASA's goals? Yes, it would technically work to NASA's goals in terms of demonstrating an in-flight abort. However, I'm laughing because it would introduce a whole host of problems, because Falcon 9 would have suffered an actual failure and would therefore have to stand down from flight operations for several months while they figure out what went wrong. So yes, it would technically meet NASA's in-flight abort standards, but it would open up a lot of other problems that we really don't want. So if all is on track, we are about 5 minutes away from the firing of those engines down there. Another question that we have here is, what is the date for the crew launch? What is the date for Demo 2? The simple answer is we don't know, but here's what we can tell you in terms of the timelines that have been made public. Earlier this month, Elon Musk stated that all of the hardware, so first stage, second stage, and Dragon capsule, would be hardware ready somewhere in the next 2 to 3 months. So that put us in February, March. For hardware readiness from a SpaceX standpoint. But he added that the NASA reviews would likely push that an additional 2 to 3 months. So conservatively, that gets us to April or May. But again, that is just simply working on what Elon has said in terms of very vague timelines, but there's nothing official from NASA. And there won't be until IFA in-flight abort is complete, and they have a chance to fully review all the data from that test. And of course, it hinges on that successful test as well. Yeah, so someone is also asking about the launch site at Boca Chica, which is solely for Starship, where they are building the new Starship number 1. They've gone back and they're just calling it number 1 now, instead of MK3. But they are still building that. They're still testing that. They had a very successful pressurized to failure test of a tank to verify welds and everything this week. Boca Chica is hopping really big down there. So, you know, I guess I accidentally made a pun there with hopper. That, I didn't mean to. Some of the best puns are accidental. So there we go. So yeah, so we should be about 3.5 minutes away from our test here. Falcon 9 still looks really frosty in the viewfinder for what I've got here, so we should be headed for a test here at 10:10 is what the targeted ignition time is. So again, just to prepare you guys for what we're going to see today. So the rocket will not lift off. It is a hold down static fire of the 9 Merlin 1B engines. That firing can last anywhere from 3 seconds to 7 seconds, depending on what the specific test parameters they have decided to go with today are. There's really no way to predict that in advance. NASA static fire missions have been anywhere in that 3 to 7 second range. So if it looks a little short, if it looks a little long, don't panic. It could be anywhere within that range. So that's what we will see. So very short firing. We'll see the exhaust cloud come out the back, and then we will hopefully hear, well, we will definitely hear something because the wind is literally blowing everything, including the sound right at us. So we should get a good sound as probably about like 15-20 seconds after the engines ignite here. So about 2.5 minutes it should be, if they are all on track. There's a good vent. That's about the 2.5 minute vent. So that's very, very good, indicating that all is on track. And you are actually looking at the Falcon 9. We are actually to the north of the pad, so the transporter erector is not blocking our view. The only thing blocking our view of the rocket right now is the gaseous oxygen venting out of the first stage, which is totally normal. So what you are seeing is the actual rocket. Again, it doesn't have grid fins, it doesn't have landing legs, because the rocket is not expected to survive the abort next week, and even if it does, it will just chuck into the ocean and be destroyed. So with that, we should be under a minute to go. So I'll shut up and we'll watch. Thank you again to all of your questions, and for those of you watching from around the world. It's always our privilege and our pleasure to bring you these events as they take place. So we should be under 30 seconds to go at this point. With a killer wind. There we go. Well, I'd say that's a good 7-second firing of the engines. That was definitely on the longer side. Unfortunately, the wind was so strong, it muffled all of the sound. We'll call that a first. Never seen that happen before. But there we go, a very large and nice cloud and plume over 39A. There's a little wider angle so you can get a better sense of where we are. That's pad 39B, the SLS pad over to the right. but that was a good long duration hold down firing. So as always, what we do now, we've had a static fire. It appeared to go normal. It ran for more or less the expected amount of time in that window. So now we wait for SpaceX to tweet confirmation of a good static fire and a good quick look data review, which will pave the way for them to get this rocket back into the horizontal integration facility, get it mated to Crew Dragon, and then get back out to the pad ahead of the In Flight Abort launch next Saturday, the 18th. But that's all good. What you guys think? Excellent.
You said the wind blocked it out, but...
Right? There's a first time for everything. Really glad they weren't trying to launch today, because I think they'd have a lot of trouble with the winds and everything today here on the ground. So probably a good move that they ended up delaying a week. So, so yeah, thank you guys so much for joining. It's always our pleasure to bring you these launches. If you have not already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel here where you are watching this. Turn on notifications so you get push notifications to your phone or email whenever we've uploaded a video or whenever we're going live. We promise we don't spam you. We only put up really cool space stuff like this live stream today, or all of the build operations that are going on in Boca Chica, Texas. So please go ahead and like and subscribe to our page. Go ahead and follow us too. We are at NASASpaceflight on Twitter. I'm at KrishG_NSF. We will be here with you again for the actual launch of the In Flight Abort next Saturday. Right now it is scheduled for no earlier than Saturday the 18th of January from 8 a.m. to 12 noon Eastern, which is 1300 to 1700 UTC on Saturday. So that is going to be it. That is going to be it from us here at the at Playa Linda Beach and the Cape Canaveral seashore. And thank you all for joining us. Have a great weekend.